We have corrections here, right? Automatic rescaling, flat field correction, dead pixel correction. Right? Automatic rescaling is there because your original image is actually really low contrast, and it improves the contrast of your image by running the numbers through a certain type of histogram. What is that called?
Priori.
The lookup table. So it runs it through the lookup table and it gets new values, and those new values cause the final image to have better looking contrast. It improves the colors, uses the full range of colors, right? Blacks all the way to whites rather than just grays.
So pre-processing is happening on the latent image,
So pre-processing is happening not on the latent image,
not on the
no, but it's working on the raw data.
before the
So-
latent.
No, after. It's between latent and manifest. Right? Because you have the latent image, for example, in CR, latent image are the electrons stuck in the phosphor layer. Right? When we hit it with the laser, right, light comes out, we collect the light, throw it through the ADC. That's not the latent image anymore, right? We have a signal now. But we can't see the signal, so it's not a manifest image either. Right? It's just our raw data. It's the information about our image.
So does pre-processing happen all at the same time, like, or is there like steps?
There's steps. So it'll do one, then the next, then the next. It'll do the corrections in
Corrections
some order.
So corrections first, and then ADC, and then histogram, or?
So no, ADC does have to happen first.
Okay.
Right? We need to have a digital signal before any of this can happen.
Okay.
Because remember, all of this is working off numbers. Right? All of these require the histogram in order to function. And they can't work without first getting numbers into the histogram. So quantization has to happen first. Then our corrections will happen in some order, doesn't matter what order, right? And then after all the corrections are done, you will get your final image, your manifest image. Okay. So automatic rescaling, adjust your contrast. Flat field correction, remember this one was when the detector doesn't evenly detect X-rays. Some parts might be slightly less sensitive. So in this case, it just accounts for that to make everything look even on a blank detector, right? You throw anatomy in front of it, then your anatomy will look correct. Dead pixel correction, right? Sometimes our detectors have pixels, they have dells which aren't properly working. And maybe the dell dies, say poor manufacturing, got a short circuit, doesn't matter. But the dell's not working anymore. How do we prevent the dell from showing up white on the final image?
Surrounding pixels.
That's right. We look at the surrounding pixels, right? Get the average of the colors of the surrounding pixels, give it to that dead pixel, and that's how the image still looks correct. Okay, so that was pre-processing, things that happens behind the scenes. So you never know that there was anything wrong in the first place. The image just looks perfect when it pops up. Right. And then we have post-processing. So, Cody, when we are doing leveling or windowing, what is going on?
Changes in like contrast or brightness.
Changes contrast or brightness, and which one goes to which one?
When leveling is brightness, and then windowing is contrast.
Good. Leveling is brightness and windowing is contrast. Okay. Sindhu, what do we mean by electronic cropping or masking?
That's when you cut the, like cropping. I don't know how to explain. Let me see. Reducing the anatomy that you want to see.
Reducing the anatomy that you want to see. Good. Right? So it's kind of like collimation in a way, right? Reducing the anatomy that you want to see. Shamika, what's the difference between cropping and actual collimation?
Cropping is like if you want to take the white, you don't want the white in your image, so you kind of like take that part and leave it out.
Okay, and why would you have white in your image? What was that issue that could lead to white?
I know that you see the white line, but
3 words. Blank, blank, blank.
What was the question again?
So,
Is it not enough
for example,
exposure?
what's one reason we might do cropping? It's when we have the white
oh, the
on the outside of our
histogram?
image.
No.
Histogram?
Analysis of
Error.
Error, yeah, what they say.
Well, go ahead and say it yourself.
Histogram analysis error.
Good, histogram analysis
Oh,
error,
okay.
yes. So if there's a histogram analysis error, then you would want to go in and crop the image, leave that collimated area out. Good. Let's see, Carla, what
Thank you.
else would you say is the difference between cropping and actual collimation?
Collimation, you do it before you take the picture.
Good, so collimation happens before the X-ray exposure. And so what are the benefits of collimation?
More focus, the X-rays are more focused on a particular area. Basically, like the field of view is closed off.
Okay, so the field of view is closed off, the X-rays are looking at a smaller area, but why is that important? Why is that a good thing?
Less exposure to the patient.
Great, so one benefit of collimation is reducing exposure and reducing dose to the patient. Okay. Mansi, what is a second reason for collimation?
To increase image quality.
Okay, and how would collimation increase image quality?
So it will reduce the amount of scatter.
It will reduce the amount of scatter. Very good. So if we think back to the previous semester, what is scatter, right? X-rays hit something, they lose energy, they bounce in a different direction. Right? Scatter is useless information. Scatter only serves to fog up your image. It reduces the contrast of your image with junk information. And if you have a wide open collimation, if you're exposing a lot of area, there's more area for scatter interactions to take place in. You will produce more scatter, the IR will pick up more scatter, the image will look worse. So that's why collimate down nice and tight so that you limit how much scatter is being produced. Okay, so scatter helps to make your image look, collimation helps to make your image look better because of that. So electronic cropping, electronic masking, since it takes place afterwards, after you shot your X-ray, it doesn't reduce patient dose, right? It doesn't improve scatter. So this should not be something that you rely on, right? You should be doing proper physical collimation, right? This should be your last resort, right? Especially in the case of a histogram analysis here. Good. Let's see. Reagan, what is stitching?
The only thing I could think of is like whenever they do those, the scoliosis thing, right?
Mhm.
They literally take 2 or multiple X-rays and put them together.
Very good. That's exactly it. So stitching, most commonly used for scoliosis series when you want to see the whole spine, right? Spine is bigger than 14 by 17. Right? So you need multiple shots to get the whole spine. But you want to see the whole spine on a single image. So the computer will stitch those images together for you. So stitching, right, just joining together, joining multiple images together to create one giant image. Very good. Let's see. Janelle, what is edge enhancement?
Increases the contrast on the edge of the structure.
Increases the contrast on the edge of the structure. Good. So if you were to try and explain that in more common terms, what would that mean?
It's giving more definition.
Gives it more of a definition. All right, good. So the structures look more outlined, right? So the edges pop out a little bit more. The edges are more clear. Right? sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes that's not a good thing, right? So you use it sparingly, right? Usually it's going to be the radiologist that would use it, or sometimes you might see this in OR as well, because your C-arms also have an edge enhancement feature. So if the doctor's like, I can't quite see where the edge of this fracture is supposed to be, right? Up on edge enhancement and see if that makes things a little bit more clear. Very good. Equalization. What is that, Melanie? Equalization. Okay. Feel free to look back at your notes from Monday. Okay. That's okay.
Lifeline month.
Lifeline once. Well, let's lifeline someone that hasn't spoken yet. So anyone else in this front row?
Fuck that.
Jay, you've been chosen as the lifeline. What is equalization?
Equalization increases the range of exposures visualized for better contrast.
Okay. And so in more common people terms, what does that mean?
Equalization takes
More normal people terms.
the word equalization takes the lights that we see and makes them easier to see by taking grays and making them black and white.
All right, very good. So it's very similar to our automatic rescaling, right? Let's say we get an image and the contrast doesn't look great, it looks too gray, right? The darkest color is just a dark gray, the brightest color is just a light gray, right? You don't actually have blacks and whites in your image. In those sorts of situations, you can use equalization to expand your grayscale, expand your range of colors, so that you do get the blacks, you do get the whites. Yes, Jay?
So would that be useful with like poor technique? Let's say someone underexposes a patient.
Not quite. So this is more useful in situations where the computer doesn't properly pre-process the image.
Okay. So
So-
let's, if you used a normal technique on a patient that is, let's say hypersthenic,
Mhm.
it wouldn't really help in that situation?
No, not really.
Okay.
Because as long as the lookup table is functioning properly, you'll still get your blacks, you'll still get your whites. Now the anatomy inside will look more gray, but that's to be expected because that's body habitus. But in this case with equalization, what's going on is that the entire image, right, is just low contrast, right? So it's like even the areas that are air don't look black. It just looks kind of gray, right? So something most likely went wrong during the processing, and so equalization helps to sort of fix it.
So you have low contrast and it just enhances it to make it.
Right, so let's say that you've got low contrast. That means your darkest color is only dark gray. You don't have black, right? You only have dark gray. Your lightest color is light gray. You don't have white, you only have light gray. So every single color in your image is somewhere between dark gray and light gray.
Okay.
So you don't have a lot of range, right? So if you take a look at the example we have here, right? Notice that even in areas that you expect to be air, right? It looks gray,
Okay.
right? It's a dark gray, yes, but it's still gray. It doesn't look black like air should. So equalization takes this range of colors and stretches it out. It takes those dark grays and stretches them until they become black. It takes those light grays and it stretches them until they become white. And everything in between also stretches and spreads out so that now your image looks like it has proper contrast.
Okay.
Ooh-wee, that marker.
Ooh, that marker, I agree. That's a terrible marker.
Is it a P?
Okay, so let's see. Johns, what is smoothing?
Smoothing is basically smoothing out the noisy image or smoothing out a noisy image.
Okay, smoothing out a noisy image. And what do we mean by a noisy image?
over. Is it overexposure? Or is
So
it
static key. So not overexposure, but the other one.
underexposure?
Underexposure. Good. So why does our image need smoothing? It's because it got underexposed. Not enough X-rays reach the IR, and so the image looks staticky, right? It's kind of like when we had that analogy of rain on concrete, right? If not enough raindrops fall on the concrete looks spotted, right? It doesn't look evenly wet. And Shaheen, what is that vocabulary term we use to describe the staticky look of an underexposed image?
A noise.
What kind of noise? Start with the Q. Say it. What is it?
A quantum noise. I'm not-
Very good. That's it. Quantum noise. Or if you want, you can use the even fancier term, right? Quantum motto. So quantum noise or quantum motto. That is that staticky, spotted appearance of an image that is underexposed. Very good. So smoothing helps to get rid of that. All right. Veronica, what is digital annotation?
Writing your patient position, digitally putting in your patient position into the computer,
Okay.
manifesting.
All right, good. So you can put information like patient position directly onto your image, and then you can save it there, and that whatever you write down will follow the image while being visible on the picture.
So does the marker be also annotation?
So, is a marker annotation? That depends on what kind of marker you're talking
Oh, I
about.
see.
So when you say marker,
A digital marker would probably be an annotation, sir.
yes, so digital marker, right? When your texts go and they click the L, and then they click the corner of the chest above the shoulders, right? That is a digital marker. As opposed to a physical marker, which is what?
Pre.
No, physical marker?
We do it before.
Physical marker?
Just a physical marker.
Yeah, that's why which we do it before the printing.
Right. Well, I
Not
just want you
post.
guys to show me your physical markers. That's all.
that's all.
Physical markers. Right?
Yeah.
I was hoping that
I thought you were just acting brave.
Running
I was
laps
hoping
around people.
telepathy, right? I was hoping
Telepathy.
All right.
He was helping with
So,
the smashing.
right, so physical markers, right? As opposed to digital markers, ones that you stick on afterwards. So, which digital annotations are you allowed to do? Which digital annotations are you not allowed to do? For example, Veronica mentioned putting patient position. So something like upright, supine, prone. Is that acceptable digitally?
Yes, sir. AP.
Okay, that is. Although, depending on where you are, there may be physical markers that have that as well. And if you have the option to use a physical marker, should you?
Yes.
Yes, you should. Yes.
What about like when you're in portables, don't put portables on it,
Mhm. Yes, great. That's another good one, right? Marking an image as portables, right? That way, if a radiologist looks in an image and like, man, what's with all these lines and why does the patient look all crooked? And then you say, it's a portable X-ray. So that's why the patient doesn't look ideal. Okay, so yes, portables, another good annotation to use. Any other annotations that you can think of?
Hyperextension.
Time, flexion extension, good. So you just learned about C-spine. So when you do C-spine images, right, you want to, sometimes you get orders for C-spine with flexion and extension. So you do a lateral, right, mark as lateral, you do one here, mark as flexion, you do one here, mark it as extension, right? Put those annotations onto your image so the doctor knows which one is which. Yes, they can tell based on how they look, but you should also mark it so that they know what the position was meant to be, right? Because sometimes, right, the images don't actually look all that different. Maybe the patient has difficulty bringing their neck down. So the lateral and the flexion look very similar, right? But as long as you have that annotation, so the doctor knows that this is the one that was attempted flexion, then they can tell. Very good. Also, time. So what kind of time would we want to mark on the images? Right, so we talked about that small bowel series, how you have to take pictures at regular intervals, like 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes after contrast. And so you can mark that time on your image. Very good. Okay, let's see. Emily, what kind of annotation is absolutely not allowed? Digital markers, correct. So you should not be using digital left, you should not be using digital right markers. And you should be using your physical markers. Now, let's say that you somehow managed to lose both markers. Let's say that you went to the restroom and you accidentally flushed both markers down the toilet while you were doing number 2, and then you have a patient immediately after.
True story.
And you have no markers now, right? You've got no markers. Is it better to do a digital marker or no marker?
Digital marker.
In that case, it's better to do a
So
digital
then you
marker.
can,
Yes.
is using those,
Disposable marker.
disposable marker better than the digital?
Yes, using a disposable physical marker is better than using digital. Now, even if you do not have a physical marker, right? Even if you want to mark your image digitally, you should still put something on your IR to let you know which side is which, so you don't accidentally mismark your image, right? So can you think of anything you can do to help mark your image, even if you don't have a physical marker?
Paperclip.
Don't they have those little balls, like the lead strips that you can just put on?
Okay.
You talking about like marking left or right, like if you're not sure?
Right, so very good. So just anything that is radial opaque,
You forgot that.
anything that's radial opaque, just put it there instead, just tape it there, and use that so that you know which side it was, right? Take a paper, yes, so perhaps a paper clip. No, paper clip might end up getting burnt out, so it's gonna be a bit iffy. Right? But yeah, take a paper clip, right, bend it to an L shape, right, take it under the board, so you know which side is which. Something that I used to do was, if for whatever reason I didn't have my marker on me, I would just take a coin, like a penny or something, just put it in the left corner, and that's how I knew which side was left. And then I just put my digital marker right on top of the penny, and it looks like it's a round marker with an L in it. Okay, so yes, right, if I somehow lost my marker, which occasionally happened because patients walk off with markers stuck to their sleeves, yeah, that's what I did until I found my marker again.
One question.
Yes, John.
Are those disposable markers valid in court?
Yes, disposable markers are fine, yes.
So
As long as they're not digital.
But
As
we're
long as
not,
they're not digital.
we can't really use them because we're students and we need to show them.
Correct. Students should not be using disposable markers. Hold on, let me see. I think there's another question somewhere.
What's the order of operations here?
Oh yes, how many times have I lost my marker? I probably lost 2 full sets of markers over my 10 years.
Just two?
That's a pretty good record.
Yeah.
Your KD is up there.
I'm thinking you lost like 10 pairs. Yeah, me too.
Well, I got lucky in quite a few of them. Right? I noticed soon enough I was able to go linen diving and find my marker, or it's somewhere inside the linen, like so. Or it got stuck on someone's shirt, and I like ran back to the waiting room, like, let me check your shirt real quick. Is it here? Is it here? Is it here? Ah, it's stuck to you. Thank you. They're like, what on earth is that?
Is that still considered to be like appropriate? Because like thinking back, I probably messed up. Like I lost my marker on a bed, and I came back, I went in, looked in it, and I found it. But the like seconds later, as I was walking out, the patient started to code, and I didn't touch him, but I was like, oh.
That's okay, as long as
I was never here.
So yeah, no problem with doing that.
Okay, cool.
No problem with doing
I
that.
felt like shit. It's like I'm gonna leave.
He's like, damn, I just killed him.
No, I left. I was like, this is not my job. This is not my problem.
All right, sorry. Let's get back on topic.
I'm sorry, Shaheen had a question.
Yeah,
before.
Shaheen.
So I lost my friend.
I'm sorry.
Whenever you remember, just raise your hand and off.
I'm sorry, Shaheen.
Okay, image flip. Let's see. Angelica, what is image flip? Okay, what is
When they poke the button and they flip it like either that way
going to left or right.
Good, right? So you reverse left or right, or right? Maybe you have the ankle upside down with the foot towards the sky, right? So you just flip it top and bottom, right? Or maybe everything's reversed, you have to rotate it 180 degrees, right? Image flip.
Oh, like one with the green strip on one side.
Right, with the green strip on the wrong side.
So if you have-
I forget about it sometimes. I like
Sure.
the marker.
Right, that's right. But in
Let me
that
ask
case,
you the
image flip.
question now.
Go ahead, Tricky.
So the technologists don't find it troublesome to mark it later, or they don't keep any marks and all. Is it difficult to figure out which is the right and the left, other than keeping a physical
So is it,
coin or something to remember?
so if you're doing a chest and the patient's a normal patient, then it's easy to figure out what's left and right, right? You can, for example, just look at the heart channel. If the heart's towards this side, then you know that's the left. Now, of course, you have patients with situs inversus, which the organs are backwards. So very important that you are still marking your chest, so you know when that happens. Right? Did I tell you the story about the doctor who didn't believe a patient had situs inversus?
Yeah, you did tell us.
I did. Okay. Well, just as a quick refresher,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So there was a tech, I think it was over at LBJ. Tech shot a chest X-ray of a patient that had situs inversus, so the organs were backwards. So the left side was marked properly, but the heart was on the opposite side, right? The doctor saw the image, didn't believe that the patient actually had it, called the patient back, had the tech do it again in front of their eyes so they could make sure that the marker was in the right spot. It turned out exactly the same, and the doctor said, okay, you didn't mismark it.
I've been upset. I would have been. How dare you check
How often
me?
does it happen like this and always in opposite direction?
It's a rare condition, but I've seen it before.
What is called when the heart is on the right side?
Dex,
So it's dextrocardia.
dextrocardia,
Dexter?
dextro.
Dextrocardia.
Like the serial killer Dexter. Dextro,
Yeah,
dextro.
thinking of the normal
So
life.
only, in
Dextrocardia.
so only in unusual circumstances it might get confusing the side is also side.
No.
Ribs.
So,
Stuff like that. Like, you don't, you can't
What is the question trying?
what are you learning right now?
Tibia.
What are you guys learning right now with Mr. Donahue? C and T spine.
spine.
If you have an APC spine, what sort of landmark are you going to use to tell left from right? Nothing. Because the left side of the spine looks exactly like the right side of the spine. There's no way, once you see the image, to tell that's left, that's right, other than blindly trusting that the left side is always going to be here and the right side is always going to be there. Right? So, for things like spine, for things like head work, very, very important that you mark your image in some fashion so you know which side is which.
And ribs.
Does that make sense? All
I
right.
have a quick question.
Yes, John.
So, for you know how for CR, I think it might be similar for DR too. You know how the order says AP chest or PA chest. So if you shoot under AP chest, is the right still gonna be here?
Good question.
flip
So
it.
if you shoot a PA chest under an AP chest request or file, right? So you shoot up patient's position PA, but on the computer you have selected AP, your chest will look flipped backwards.
Did that yesterday.
It will be the wrong way, so you will need to image flip your chest.
Okay.
It comes out exactly the same. It just looks reversed. So you just flip it back and then it looks correct.
Why is there a lateral on this AP request? Huh?
All right, image inversion.
Excuse me, sir,
Yes.
just to stop say on what you said, that they normally do in the portables because they can't take the PA of the chest, so they flip it and.
No, so
I've seen
if
them do like in the portables that is flip there.
they should not, there should be no reason to flip it on portables. If they are shooting
It didn't work out that way.
a patient AP on portables, and it is an AP put up on the portable machine, it should come out
AP.
correctly. They
And
make
the,
sure
doc-
they're
then
perfectly correct.
the doctor would know that it is a, no, they say, they've, even the technologists have said that the physician expects to see the flipped image because that's how they want the image.
The image on a portable should pop up exactly the same, in exactly the same orientation as when you shoot an image PA. What happens is, so when you shoot an image PA, right, and the image pops up on the screen, where is that left marker? Is the left marker on this side or is it on this side of your image? Your left marker pops up over here on a PA. But on a PA, your patient's like this. You put your left marker here. Why is the left marker popping up on this side in the image? That's right. The computer automatically flips it for you. The computer has automatically flipped it for you on the PA because it knows you shot a PA. So it flips it to the correct orientation the doctors will be expected to read it in. For an AP image, no flipping is necessary because an AP should come out exactly as the image looks. So, the only time you would see something flipped on a portable would probably be if the cassette was placed upside down. Right? If the cassette's upside down, then the image shows up upside down, and then you do a 180-degree turn, and that's your image.
Why does it flip it? I don't understand. Like, why can't they just look at it the right way? Like,
The way it comes out.
yeah. Like, why-
Because they're used to reading it a certain way.
Oh.
They work 80-hour weeks. They're tired.
Like you want to see the
I don't want to press no more
you want to
buttons.
see the heart on the
I was
left.
saying that earlier. I was saying earlier today, like one of the doctor and me, Ben talked like when we're taking C spine and T spine, it's coming out facing this way.
Uh-huh.
But he said he looks at CTs or whatever,
Yes.
and it's facing this way. So
Correct.
he's saying, can y'all have it facing this way? So like Abraham, the manager, he was saying that I want to see, in the system if it automatically do that or whatever.
Yes.
I'm like,
Don't pay me enough.
Yeah. But yeah, that's absolutely true. If you guys think about your cross-sectional project from last semester, and you think about like the C spines, T spines, L spines, patient always looks like they're facing this way on the image, right? But of course, in X-ray, when we shoot them, we have the left side against the IR, so all of our X-rays are facing this way. So yes, it can be tricky for the doctors to read, and oftentimes they'll end up flipping it to the way they're most comfortable reading them. Okay. So, Charo, what is image inversion?
I knew he was going to do that.
Image were so cool.
Let me think again because I don't remember. It could be inverting the image. So let's say something's wrong. You could make it lighter, like using the grayscale, inverted grayscale.
Mhm.
Or
Very good. That is exactly it, right? So
yeah.
here's your normal chest X-ray. Here is an inverted chest X-ray, right? All the colors are backwards. Black became white, white became black, right? Everything.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. But if that's how you can remember it, right? Image inversion is the Michael Jackson of X-ray post-processing.
Can we quote you on that?
That was all right.
Well, Reagan can say that. No.
Brady's feeling like we have
Okay, sorry.
So what all, like, I know it says lung nodules, but like, are fractures easier to visualize with that as well? Or?
Anything, right? If you're having trouble seeing something normally, just flip it. It might just make it easier, right?
Okay.
The difference, right, might just causes your eyes and your brain to like reprocess and then.
To like notice it? Is that
Correct.
What would you do? Like, would you flip it?
So yeah, like for example, there's times when I'm trying to look for something on an X-ray image, I can't quite see it under normal contrast. Like there have been times when I was looking for like the carina, right? And I'm having a real tough time finding the carina. So I flip it over, right? And then instead I look for like the light part rather than the dark part, right? And sometimes that helps. Or if I am looking for maybe a really small fracture, can't quite see it on one, I can try flipping it, see if it shows up better on the other one.
like as a black line instead of a white line?
Right. So it's just a tool there that can be used to help you look for things. All right, and then finally magnification is just magnification. Nothing fancy here.
You can see it on the TV.
I appreciate you.
Oh, so it's good.
It is, but.
I hit that SIM card real quick.
Something like
That
that.
was a trick that Mr. Donahue showed us.
With the
If the
cloud.
clavicles are above or below, they're either AP or PA.
All right, so depending on how you shoot your image, it is more likely for the clavicles to be up at or above the apices of an AP.
And then for PA, low.
It's crazy how different they are.
Right? So that's why on portables, a lot of times your texts tell you to throw a small angle onto your tube.
That's unfortunate.
Right? Because if you just shoot straight, the clavicles are going to be elevated. Throw on that small clouded angle, and you push the clavicles back down to where they should be on your portable APs.
Oh my god, I just
So
noticed.
Dude, that
are the
foosh goes
finances
crazy.
broken over these images?
Oh my god.
What is that? What pathology is this?
That's a foosh.
That is not a. Well,
Tell me that's not.
Foosh is not pathology, right? Foosh is.
A fall on outstretched hand. That's unfortunate.
Foosh is not pathology, though.
Remember the
Which is a
the
reason.
weight fall?
Yeah.
Dislocation,
That's not gonna
yes. This is a double-digit dislocation, right? Both phalanges have popped out of the joints.
Man,
Popped backwards
they
out
got
of the joints.
they got really really lucky with that oblique that they could just hit that. That looks like it hurts a lot.
Right?
That
Right?
would just
Right?
be a-
Imagine trying to be
Internal
the
fixation.
one getting the lateral hand X-ray on this one.
Close internal fixation.
No.
Close
All right.
internal
Reduction.
reduction. Right.
Okay, and then
Thank
we
you.
also discussed, right? So this is where we left off, right? This is where we left off on Monday. So we did briefly discuss this though, right? What are the issues with post-processing? Right? Number one, right? Issue with cropping does not reduce patient dose. So if you're leaving your collimation open, you are violating ALARA. Right? Your goal is to provide a dose that is as low as reasonably achievable. Okay. And second, and now this is a very, very big issue in radiography. So, let's say that you're shooting an X-ray. You've got a patient that is a little bit bigger than normal. You need a little bit on the thick side.
Thick.
You think that you need to adjust your technique. Maybe, you're not quite sure. It's kind of borderline. You're like, do I need to change it or do I not? So, what would you do? Would you go with the lower technique or would you go with the higher technique?
I'll start with the lower first.
You would start with the lower, so shoot them 2 times?
And then give
Yeah,
them.
depend- especially if I know them, I don't like them. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
Oh, Tim, you need next
Alright,
week, dog.
so-
The
I'm gonna
text
hit you with
just go
that
up.
1,000.
I've seen
Alright,
text
so
go
let's
up.
say you have someone that's borderline and they're not sure if you want to use the lower technique or higher technique. Who thinks that they would use the lower technique?
And it borderline, you said?
They're borderline. You could use low technique, you could use high technique, right? But right, you don't want to repeat your image. So, who would use lower technique?
So
And who would use higher technique?
to avoid like re-exposure.
Right. Exactly, to avoid re-exposure, right? To avoid a repeat image.
And think about the text
Most
too. They
texts will
change it
err on the side of
before.
caution
They
and use
change
a
it
higher
before.
technique.
Yeah, they just look at the.
I have
The
a question.
problem is, as this happens, over and over and over, we end up with what is called dose creep. The amount of dose is actually going higher and higher because when you are underexposed, right, it's obviously underexposed, you can see the quantum model. When it's overexposed, well, you don't
It looks
see
right.
anything bad. It looks good, right? It looks good when it's overexposed. Why? Because of automatic rescaling. Right? Automatic rescaling makes your image look pretty good no matter what. Only problem is it can't handle quantum model. So even if it's underexposed, contrast looks good, brightness looks good, but it looks a bit fuzzy. Right? As a tech, you're like, ugh, I don't like fuzzy. I'm going to make it higher technique, higher technique, higher technique, and we get more and more dose to our patients, even though digital should be helping us lower dose. So, because of rescaling, right, and because after we shoot an image, right, we can always try to adjust it if we have it very overexposed. This still violates ALARA, right? So, using a higher dose than normal, just to avoid having to worry about things like quantum model is a violation of a LARA. Yes.
I have a question. So what if you turn everything up and you blast them high
Mhm.
and your image looks burnt?
Mm.
So that's why I said low, because okay, if I take my picture and I'm like, oh, I do need to go up, and I go up, bam, I got it. So
Good. So
you know,
the question here is, how high do we go, right?
yeah.
So in the case of the image being burnt, right, what you've done is you've gone so high on your dose, you've gone outside your exposure latitude, right?
Mhm.
So remember, you have that wiggle room where you can have slightly lower dose, slightly higher dose. But if you make your dose too high, right, now that's when you get that burnout.
And you still give them radiation, because then you got to go back down. So
Right. Exactly. So the question is more like staying within your exposure latitude,
Right.
right? Are you gonna aim slightly higher, or are you gonna stay slightly lower?
So basically
Right.
saying, don't shoot with the highest dose, just go higher, so
Right.
that you can get it in one shot.
Right, so a lot of people tend to go slightly higher because they're scared of quantum model, right?
Okay.
So this is why it's very important that even though we're doing digital, you know your correct techniques. You know your correct KVP, you know your correct mass. So that you don't just blindly go, well, they look big, so I'm just gonna use something big, right? If you know your patient size and you know the techniques for each size, then you can tailor your technique to that correct body habitus without worrying about overexposing your patient. Yes, Johns.
I said lower because if the picture comes out noisy, can't you just use smoothing?
So can you just use smoothing? Yes, just keep in mind that smoothing is not magic, right? It does help to reduce the motto, but you do still lose out on some of that detail.
What was his question?
So John's idea was that you can use lower dose, and yes, you'll have quantum model, but then you can use smoothing to get rid of the quantum model. So that way it helps the patient. And yes, that is a valid train of thought. Just keep in mind that there's always a trade-off somewhere, right? So with smoothing, yes, you'll still have a nice looking image, but the image will have less information than if you had shot it under proper technique. Speaking of loss of information, if you window, if you level your image before sending it over to the radiologist, you are going to cause a loss of information in the raw data. Right? So if they want to window and level themselves, they no longer have as much information to do it with. Okay? Yes?
So you're saying that we shouldn't mess with the brightness, we should only mess with the contrast?
You shouldn't mess with either of them. The image that comes out should be what you send across.
But earlier in, what's it called, what's the thing called? Or wherever they look for the session. What's it called?
Synapse.
Yeah, I saw Mr. Donnie, he did, like, he, was doing,
Correct.
leveling, so what's
Correct.
the difference?
So what I'm saying here is you should not be doing this before sending the images into Synapse.
But they
So-
do it anyway.
If you're,
You have to do it anyway.
so if you're in clinic,
Yeah.
right? If you are in clinic, you get an image on your screen after shooting an X-ray, and you send that image directly to Synapse. All the information that you shot, all the information that you collected, is going into Synapse. From there, you can adjust it, you can change it up and down, back and forth, and then as long as you don't save it, all that information is still there.
Because you can
How-
still do display as acquired, right?
You can always return it to the original state, display as acquired. On the other hand, you shoot your X-ray, image pops up on your screen. You then go and you're like, I kind of want to make these nodules look a little bit more. So let me change the contrast so that it's more black and white, right? I don't have a higher contrast, lower contrast resolution, right? Make it pop a little bit more, and then you send it over to radiologist, and the radiologist is like, I can't see any lung markings anymore. Let me try and window this to try and find them. It's not going to work as well, because by changing it at the X-ray console, saving it like that, and then sending it, you have changed the information, you have lost the original information. So the danger is in changing it at your console, changing it before you've sent the images to the doctors. A lot of techs like to touch up their images, right? You think it's like Instagram where they touch up the image before they send
True about
images to the radiologist.
All tech do it.
But here's the problem.
They got different computers. Muy brain.
Oh Lord,
Is that French in there?
There are two different types of monitors. Primary displays, secondary displays. You, as a tech, are using a secondary display. Your displays do not follow the display standards. They don't need a certain brightness, they don't need a certain contrast, they don't need a certain reduction in
Tell me.
reflection or glare. So the way you view the image is different from how the radiologist views the image, but their monitors need to adhere to these requirements. So just because the image looks one way to you, doesn't mean it's going to look the same way to the radiologist, because their screens will display the image in much better detail, much better quality. What looks poor to you might actually look good to them. So let the radiologists be the ones to decide whether or not it needs to be windowed, and let them do the windowing.
They make the big.
Yeah, they make the big bucks.
They got the big bucks computer too.
Yes.
If the technology changes the look of it, will it, if he makes it more darker, will it become more darker for the?
Yes, it'll become more dark for the radiologist, yes. If you're changing it at the computer console. Now, when we're doing image reviews, right? The images have already been sent across, and so the data is there, right? So if I change things, right, when I'm demonstrating things for you, I'm not really messing with anything because the original data is still there. But if you change the data and then send it to Synapse, now things are gonna be not as good. All right, it's 1:26, let's take a 10-minute break here. And please be back at 1:36. You can stretch yourself.
Hey.
I'll be up here if anyone wants to follow along, right? But
Now you're gonna let him do it by himself.
I'm just gonna do this by myself.
Everybody get up.
Well, only because we love you.
Yeah.
Sternum, lateral sternum.
We appreciate.
Lateral chest. Oh, here's a new one. Swimmers. Swimmers. Right. There you go. Here's swimmers.
You gotta flick your wrist, Mr. Funk. Come on now.
Is that the one?
Which worksheet? Which worksheet?
Huh?
Remember the one that worksheet?
Which worksheet?
He's playing cool. Let him focus.
Lateral bending spine.
Worksheet about
You asked?
no, I'm asking you.
What worksheet?
Mr. Phung,
Yes.
you haven't put the grade for the worksheet yet.